Ever try picking out clothes in like almost total darkness?
It's like feeling around for colors that just aren't there, right?
Well, today's deep dive, we're talking about those who see the line between light and color, well, a little differently. Tritanopia. I've got a whole stack of research here.
And honestly, even the name sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, doesn't it? Can't wait to dig into this one.
What's so interesting is how rare it actually is. Like finding a four-leaf clover in the field of, regular ones.
1 in 15,000 newborns. To put that into perspective, that's like one person with Tritanopia in a whole sold-out baseball stadium. Imagine for a second a world where you couldn't fully tell blue from yellow.
That's the reality for people with Tritanopia. And here's the thing, their vision is clear. It's the colors themselves that get, well, mixed up.
Okay, so hold on. It's not like they're seeing double or anything. More like their, internal color palette is just different.
Think of it like this. Your eyes have these things called cone cells. They're like tiny antennae, each tuned to a specific light frequency, red, green, blue. You got it. In Tritanopia, it's the blue antenna, those S cones. They're either missing or not working quite right.
It's like listening to a symphony, but the trumpet's broken, the music's still there, just one crucial part's distorted.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. So if their blue antennae are on the fritz, how does that affect how they see other colors? The research mentioned struggling with shades of the same color. Like, what does that actually look like in real life?
Oh, absolutely. Picture a sunset, right? All those reds, oranges, yellows blending together.
Someone with Tritanopia might just see a kind of muddy wash of pinks and reds. Those distinct color boundaries most of us take for granted. They'd be missing.
Wow, okay, that's a big difference. Makes you think twice about stuff you wouldn't even consider picking out groceries even. You mentioned clothes earlier.
Exactly. Imagine trying to pick a ripe banana.
Yeah.
You know, how it goes from green to yellow to brown.
Those shifts could be really hard to see, making grocery shopping a real challenge. And don't even get me started on cooking.
Oh gosh, yeah. I bet telling the difference between like raw chicken when it's cooked through, that could be really tough.
It's amazing how much we rely on those little color cues without even realizing. But here's where it gets really interesting, because the research mentions people with Tritanopia don't have trouble with red-green traffic lights, unlike, the more common red-green color blindness. Why is that? It's by design. Traffic lights are specifically made with a much brighter green and the reds more orangish. Creates a distinct difference in the wavelengths. Even with red-green color deficiencies, the signals are still clear.
I had no idea that much thought went into something as basic as a traffic light. Speaking of design, I'm curious about what actually causes Tritanopia. Seems like it's mostly genetic, but the research did mention other possibilities.
You're right. Genetics is usually the culprit, yeah. But it can also be acquired later in life. Things like eye trauma, certain medical conditions, even too much UV light. It's a whole range of possibilities.
So many things can affect how we see. Makes you appreciate how complex the human body is. But say someone thinks they might have Tritanopia, how's it diagnosed? The research mentioned this Hardy-Rand-Rittler test, which sounds more like a detective agency. What's the story there?
What's that?
It does, doesn't it? Hardy-Rand-Rittler test, or HRRT for short, that's a common one to spot Tritanopia.
Basically, imagine looking at a picture with, a bunch of colored dots, and you got to find a shape hidden in there.
That's kind of what it's like.
Then, based on how well someone does, doctors can figure out if there's a color vision issue.
So it's like a visual puzzle, unlocking how your eyes see color. I love it. And speaking of unlocking, what about these other tests the research mentioned? Ishihara, anomaliscope, Farnsworth lantern. Those sound intense.
Yeah, they each have their own way of doing things. Ishihara is probably the most famous.
You know those plates with the color dots making numbers? That one's mostly for red-green color blindness.
Then you got the anomaliscope, which is kind of like a high-tech color matching game. And the Farnsworth lantern one, that's often used for, pilots and jobs where you need super precise color vision.
It's amazing how many ways there are to, look into something as complex as how we see color. But I gotta admit, all this talk about tests and diagnoses, it makes me wonder about actually living with Tritanopia. We talked about some challenges earlier, but what about solutions? Are there ways to make life easier for people?
For sure. I mean, even just being open about it, letting people know, that helps a lot. Imagine if someone with Tritanopia tells their coworkers, hey, this is what's up, prevents misunderstandings, especially in jobs where color matters.
Right, like a design studio or a hospital. Even small differences could be a big deal.
Exactly. And for everyday life, there are little tricks people use all the time. Organizing your closet by color, using labels, that kind of thing.
Even just memorizing what color things are. like knowing a banana's yellow even if you don't quite see it that way. Those things can be game changers.
It's all about adapting, figuring out what works for you. That's incredible. But the research also mentioned some really cool tech, like those color correcting glasses. Those sound almost futuristic.
Oh, they're pretty amazing. You might have heard of chroma glasses.
They've gotten super popular. It's special lenses, right? They filter light wavelength so colors are easier to tell apart, mainly for red-green color blindness, though.
So it's like giving your eyes a whole new set of filters. I bet that's changed things for a lot of people.
It has, but gotta mention, in chroma, they're not designed for tritanopia. That's where pilestone lenses come in.
They made a specific lens just for the blue-yellow spectrum. The goal is to help people with tritanopia see those colors better.
Wow, so it's like personalized vision correction,
Yeah.
tailored to the exact type of color blindness. That's incredible. Anything else on the horizon, tech-wise, that you're excited about?
It's like we're on the edge of like a whole new world of vision correction. It's not just about glasses, is it? What about those apps and computer programs that research mentioned those? What do those do?
Oh, it's amazing how tech can help bridge that gap. Like, there are apps now that'll straight up tell you what color something is.
You just point your phone at it, and it's like, that's forest green, or that's crimson red.
Uh-huh.
You know?
No way.
Yeah. And then there are programs for computers that actually change the display, make certain colors pop out more, or they add patterns that help you see the different hues. It's like having your own personal color commentator for, well, your whole digital life.
That's wild. It really makes you realize how much of the world, like the design of it, is made for a specific way of seeing. And this tech is making it so much more inclusive.
Exactly. It's all about recognizing that normal vision is, well, it's more of a spectrum, really. We all experience things a bit differently. Tritanopia is just one example of that.
So true. Well, as we wrap up our Tritanopia deep dive here, what are some of the big takeaways you hope our listeners are walking away with?
I think the biggest one is just how much more there is to color than, well, meets the eye, right? Tritanopia shows us our brains are crazy adaptable.
They find ways to make sense of the world, even with these differences. And who knows, maybe by understanding these other ways of seeing, we can all appreciate color even more.
It's like we're expanding what it even means to see the world, you know?
Exactly. And with how fast research and tech are moving, it's exciting to think what the future holds for people with tritanopia and any kind of color blindness, really. There's so much potential there.
Absolutely. And on that night, I want to leave you with this. What if we could all step into someone else's shoes, or just look through their eyes, just for a bit? Imagine the empathy, the understanding we could build. Maybe that's the most important thing. Tritanopia, any difference, can teach us.
Now, that's a beautiful thought to end on.